KoitCast. Today's guest is an author, podcaster, storyteller, adventurer, and explorer of the unexplained. He's written more than a dozen books and is the Emmy-nominated host, writer, and producer of the New England Legend series on PBS and Amazon Prime. He's also been the writer and researcher for every episode of Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel. Please give a huge Koit welcome to Jeff Belanger. Hi Jeff, welcome to KoitCast.
Hey Koit, thanks for having me.
No worries, it's super lush having you here. You've been highly recommended. I think Dave Schrader recommended you to me, so, you know, he's a dodgy one, isn't he?
I keep telling Dave to lose my number.
And he never does.
No, he doesn't. We keep finding each other.
Right, thank you ever so much for coming on. So I've already done an intro about you, but in your own words...
How was it?
It was very good. You came out very well, yeah. In your own words, can you give an intro about yourself? Who are you?
Oh gosh, so I think the shortest answer is that I'm a writer, and I've been interested in all things strange and unusual pretty much my entire life. I was fortunate to grow up in a town called Sandy Hook, Connecticut, which is the town next to Monroe, Connecticut, where Ed and Lorraine Warren live. So I knew them since I was 13 years old, and kind of grew up around them and their work, and grew up around historic places and people that loved history and hauntings and talked about it. So that got me started on my journey of exploring this. And so for the last 25 years, I've been writing about pretty much all things strange and unusual.
Fantastic. Was that your literal introduction to the paranormal, i.e. just because they're from your town, you were somehow introduced to them, or was there another experience that maybe kicked it off?
So growing up where I did, you know, my dad and I used to love watching shows about UFOs and things like that. I had a neighbor down the street. The house was built in 1760, and which means we were England back then when that house was built. We were under the crown, and he said his house was haunted. And what was so cool about it is, you know, this was the 1980s. It was not. It wasn't like a Hollywood horror movie. It was just, we see this old guy from time to time and then he vanishes. And I thought that was really intriguing that it was, and then his parents would say, well, don't tell your folks, they'll have us committed or whatever. And this was back when ghosts were still very much in the closet, unlike today, when we can talk about it a lot more. But so I sort of grew up thinking about, like, well, what else is out there? And then watching Ed and Lorraine Warren, I would see them speak at local libraries and stuff like that, and seeing their work, and I was just intrigued. And I think it's important to sort of say I was raised Catholic, and you know, Catholicism, we've got a whole spectrum, right? There's God and the devil, and there's angels and demons, there's sinners, there's saints, there's purgatory, whatever that is. And so I sort of grew up thinking, like, well, how can I prove this is real? And my faith journey actually took me away from the church and into the graveyard, which was, you know, delightful. So what I couldn't find in the church pew on Sunday, I found at midnight in the cemetery with an EMF meter.
Do you know what? It's a quality journey you've been on it, but it's one it resonates, because I've had other guests say similar thing, i.e. they were brought up Catholic, but something happened to move them away, and they were intrigued by this other thing and were drawn into that life. Have you heard that a lot yourself?
Well, sure. So we're all trying to validate the things that we feel or think, right? Which is what's gotten the world in such trouble, because we're all in echo chambers now, with only surrounding ourselves on social media with people who think just like we do and figure everyone else must be bonkers, right? So on the one hand, growing up around that, I was always encouraged to ask questions and seek, and which is great. I thank my parents for that. Remember Mom buying me a Ouija board when I was a kid, you know, and bringing those to sleepovers and going, well, how does this work? And even back then, I was just like, oh, well, let's try blindfolding each other and see if we still get messages. And then that didn't work. And well, why is that? So always skeptical, but always curious. I think we want to validate that gut feeling we have, whatever it is about. And I found that validation pursuing haunted places.
Awesome. I'm going to jump straight into a massive question, and I know you'll know the answer to this. So what are ghosts?
A ghost, the simplest definition I've come up with, and I wrote a whole book on this, but I'll save you the $20. A ghost is the past coming to the present.
Okay.
Yeah. And Finn, roll the credits. We're done. That's it.
That's
Explained.
it. Thank you, Jeff, for appearing today.
Yeah. I mean, why expound? So look, I mean, truly, that is the simplest definition. It is the past coming to the present. Whether you want to, beyond that, we can argue, right? The fact that there's a word for it in every language, a cultural understanding of it, you can't argue that they're not real. That's ridiculous, right? That it's as real as your money, you know? So what they are, that of course will never reach a consensus. But to me, it is something from the past coming to the present for reasons we may or may not understand. The traditional sense of like this discarnate soul that's got, sticking around for some reason, or maybe it's a movie that plays over and over again, and sometimes we pick up on it. I think there's as many definitions as there are ghosts.
Now, it's interesting that you said that they're from the past. I've spoken to a number of guests in the future, and we've pondered the idea that are we the ghosts going forward?
Oh, sure.
So could they be from the future? Where does your mind sit with that?
Or could it be a parallel universe like if parallel universes are soap bubbles and they sort of bump into each other, do we see them? Do they see us? Yeah, are we the ghost? And then also just to throw a whole monkey wrench into this discussion, there's also the idea of the doppelganger of a ghost of a living person who's very much alive and well and fine, where we see a ghost of a person who's not dead at all.
And
but we see them in a
can you tell me of that? Have you got a story of that?
Sure, absolutely. So
Whoa.
I've had them come up plenty, but I remember interviewing an Australian woman who was telling me that it was a Saturday, and all she wanted to do that day was sit on the couch and read her book, have a nice down day. And her husband kind of insisted that she accompany him to the hardware store, which she really didn't want to do, but for the sake of keeping the peace, she said, okay, fine. And they left their teenage son home alone just for a little while in the afternoon. And she said, as they were pulling back into the driveway, the car park, their son walked out the front door and went white as a ghost, looking at her. And she said, what's wrong? And he said, I just walked by you in the living room on the couch reading your book. And now you're out here. It's impossible. And then they look back, and obviously she's not there. And the best she could come up with is that's really where I wanted to be. And somehow a projection of me was there. She's fine. She was not in any ill health. Nobody died. That's the whole story. Just a quirky little strange thing, but a ghost of a living person.
I like that. That is superb. Maybe that just adds, credence to the fact that, when people say, "Where are you right now?" Because they can see you're glazed over and not there. I
Yeah.
wonder if we do displace somewhere else physically.
Well, there's the idea too of a thought form or tulpa, right? In some cultures where you can think something into existence. And that's absolutely true. And even if you don't want to get metaphysical or too woo-woo about it, think about like if you've ever worked in an office where there's lots of different people and personalities, and you get that glance from someone who you don't even know, but you think they hate me. You know what I mean? And there's no reason, like nothing's happened, but you're just like, oh man, she hates me. She really hates me. And she's looking at you like, he hates me. Why does he hate me? And you've sort of created this thing, right? Out of nothing, but some strange glances. If you talk to each other, you might be best friends or find out that there's no animosity whatsoever, no nothing, everything's fine. But you've somehow both, created this reality that exists for one or both of you. And it's there, even if it's not something tangible outside of yourself, it's something that's, within. So the idea that we could project ourselves, I mean, why not? There's so much we don't understand.
That's certainly food for thought. I've not actually thought of that before. So I'm going to ponder that one a lot.
Right.
And the book she was reading, was it one of yours?
No, I hope so, but probably
Better
not.
have done.
That would have been amazing. You know what? If it was, I would have squeezed in a shameless plug right there. But so it must not have been.
Use that one in the future. I've
Yeah,
given you
right.
that one for free.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I know you sort of half mentioned this earlier. You almost said you don't know how it works, but how do you think ghosts function?
I have no idea. Definitely not. Not a clue. All I know is that people from all walks of life and various beliefs and so on have had this experience. They've talked about it. They try to understand what it means. What happens after we die, I have no idea. At the very least, like for example, I was close with my grandparents, especially my grandfathers, both of them, and even though they've been gone, both of them over 20 years now, I can think about them and I can be in a space where they were. I can remember fishing with one of my grandfathers, and I can remember going to a baseball game with another one, um, and I'm in that space. And you could say, well, that's just a memory. Sure, of course it is. But what's a memory, right? It's a moment from my past that I've brought to the present. And
Mm.
so, whether I mean, they're still with me. I remember them. I can see their faces. I remember their names. So they are still very much relevant and around, even though they've been gone and in the ground for decades. So I think at the simplest, a ghost is a memory that sticks around, either collectively or even individually. But I also think it's something more because, boy, so many people have had experiences. I've had experiences I can't explain where I go, what the hell is that? If not a ghost, I don't know, right? I mean, if believe me, anytime something weird happens, my first instinct is to say, how can I explain this away? If the curtain is fluttering by the window, do you say, was that a ghost that walked by, or is there a draft, right? Let's look for the draft first and then, reach other conclusions later.
Okay, so I'm going to have to pull on that thread now. Then, since you mentioned that you've had experiences yourself, could you go through a couple of those with me, and then we can discuss them, if that's okay?
Sure. So
Gosh.
the first one, I'd already been writing about ghosts for 6, 7 years before I had my first experience. I didn't grow up in a haunted house, didn't see them as kids, but I didn't disbelieve my friends who said that they saw something and couldn't explain it. I didn't think they were lying, but I just say, well, I believe that you believe. That's where I
Mm.
got to. I was in Paris, in the city of, down in Paris, France, and I had a day to myself, and it was in 2003, and I went down into the catacombs alone because no one would go with me. And I was down there walking around, and after getting over the initial heebie-jeebies of being around so many human skeletons, I was walking down a long, straight hallway, and I stopped because a shadow the size of a man stepped out from one side and went to the other and back again. And I just went, all right, wait a minute. I mean, I thought I was alone. And then my next thought is, well, there must be a side tunnel up there and someone's just down here with me. And I kept walking. There was no side tunnel. It was straight all the way to the end. And I went, okay, well, if that's not a ghost, I don't have another word for what it is that I
Mm.
saw. And then I started thinking about my last name. I'm very much an American mutt, as they say, right? Like various European cultures came together and their descendants, had my parents and had me and so on. But my last name is Belanger here in the United States. Over in France, it's Belanger, right? So I do have French heritage. And I was thinking, my God, my DNA must be in some of these bones somewhere, right? Traces of it somehow, somewhere. Did I connect for just a moment? And I think of it the same way I think of a lightning strike. We know lightning strikes the earth thousands of times a day all over the planet, but not usually right near where you're standing. If it ever does strike right near where you're standing, I assure you, you'll never forget it the rest of your life. And that's how I felt. I even went back 2 years later, 2 or 3 years later. I went back to the catacombs, same place. I went with my wife, and I went to the same tunnel. And I'm like, "This is a spot. Ready? Here, come on back. Here I am." And nothing. Lightning didn't strike twice. It struck once, and I'll never
Interesting.
forget it. And it took me weeks to process this. And at that point, I'd interviewed hundreds of people about their ghost experience, and now it's thousands. But back then, I went, "Oh, this must be what they meant. They were just in the right place at the right time, or wrong place at the wrong time, depending on your
Mm.
perspective."
I
I
was going to
prefer
ask
to
about
think
that
it.
actually.
Yeah.
How had your mindset changed pre to then post seeing the shadow bloke?
Well, in one regard, I never expect to see anything when I go someplace haunted. I know it's so rare for me anyway that it's the furthest thing from my mind, but it's still a good night. You know what I mean? If you're in a really cool historic place and you got access that most people don't get, and you're wandering. I tell people I can tell you where the ghosts were. I just don't know where they are. You know, um, so for me, that's still a great night. Um, I don't expect it, but when it happens, it's happened so few times to me. that I do believe I'm having an authentic experience when it does happen. And of course there's variance, right? So the spectrum of the experience to me is everything from like, Sir Winston Churchill tipping his hat to you saying, pulling out a cigar and saying, "Hello, young man," right? To like a fan, the other end could be like a smell where you're like, "That's grandma's old perfume. I haven't smelled that in decades," right? So, and then everything in between, hearing things, feeling things, seeing things, that there's a whole spectrum. And I'm a believer. I admit it. I'm a believer, but a skeptical one.
Yeah, that's good to be that. I was just thinking, when you had that Shadow Man experience, had you then thought it adds more weight to all the anecdotes you received before, and then it all sort of like a penny falling, into place.
Yeah. So no, I lost some objectivity that day for sure, because I was more inclined to believe someone was just like me, in a place where something happened that it was profound, right? So profound that you never forgot it. And I can close my eyes right now and see that experience again. See the bones around me, see the tunnel, the lighting, everything. That's the thing about this experience. It is profound enough that you don't forget it. I've also been doing this long enough to witness people who may have been ridiculed by sharing their story a few times, to the point where they've convinced themselves it didn't happen, which is interesting, right? It's always nice to get to people soon after something like this happens, because what happens with any story, right, is that it changes. It's like the fishing tale. The fish I caught was this big, and then the next time you tell it, it was this big, and eventually it was, as big as the room. And we do that because we're natural storytellers, and it doesn't mean we're dishonest or liars, but we can't help it when we're telling someone a story, and suddenly we get to a part and everybody leans in eagerly. You go, "Ooh, I got him. I got the audience." Well, then, yeah, no, it was 10 meters long or whatever, right? So we start expounding. And but early on, if you can get to someone after an experience and write it down, you're going to get as close to the truth as you can get without being there.
Did you write yours down?
I did. Yeah, I did for sure.
Well
I
played.
said, "Wow, this is my experience." I've had one now. I felt like I was in a club, like I got to join something. Like
Well, yeah, I was thinking along the lines of, like when people see UFOs or whatever,
yeah.
they've got a camera with them or a phone, but they don't do that because they're too transfixed, and then they don't report it, and they don't. But you've actually done it and wrote it down, which is
I did.
good.
And it's funny. I don't know if you want to talk UFOs. I did have a UFO experience as a kid that got validated 25 years later.
Let's do it.
Okay, so I was 11 years old, and it was about 10 or so in the evening, and I was in bed, and my father had gone out to our backyard to close the fence. And my dad started screaming at the top of his lungs, "Jeff, get out here right now! Get out here, run!" That's not my dad's way. My dad is not a scream, "Get out here now." So I jumped out of bed, run to the stairs, run outside. "Dad, what's up?" And he said, "There's a UFO in the sky right there, I swear to God." And I said, "You're so far out of your mind." And I started to walk up the little hill behind the house, and I turned around and I went, oh my goodness. There was a giant ring of lights in the sky, and it was a completely overcast night. No rain, but total cloud cover. Couldn't see any stars, which is important. In a minute, you'll figure out. So we watched this ring of lights for going on over a minute and a half, which is an eternity. That's an eternity, right? And this is the 80s. So I didn't have a cell phone on me, but absolutely could have run back inside to grab a camera. I would have had time if in hindsight. But at the time, we watched this thing so slowly move right over our next door neighbor's yard. And I looked up, and it's a ring of lights. And because of the cloud cover, I can't promise you it was solid, right? If it was starry, the stars would have disappeared, right? As the solid object moved between me and the stars. But because it was cloudy, all I could tell you was a ring of lights, a very low hum, barely, anything. And it went right over our next door neighbor's yard, and it kept going until it went over the tree line and we couldn't see it anymore. And we just went, wow, we just had a thing happen. The very next day, the front page of the local newspaper said, over 200 phone calls about this thing. Clearly, Dad and I aren't crazy. Tons of people saw it. People called the police. They called the newspapers, whatever. And the newspaper said it was a group of Cessnas, single engine airplanes.
Right.
that was flying in formation as a prank. And at 11 years old, I think any 11-year-old in any modern country, by 11, you've probably witnessed 10,000 Cessnas fly over your head by that age, right? Like,
Mm,
it's a lawnmower with wings, right? Wang, like
exactly.
they cannot fly quietly at all. And I went, well, that doesn't make sense, but who knows? 25 years later, I was interviewing a UFO, a person who studies UFOs, who was talking about some of the profound cases, and he said, in the 1980s, there was the I-84, Interstate 84 corridor experience in Newtown, Connecticut. Sandy Hook is part of Newtown, and a local airline pilot took a photo of the craft that was witnessed by all these people, and I'm like, oh, I was one of those witnesses. My dad was one of those witnesses, and he had the photo. And I looked at it and I went, wow, Dad. I'm emailing it to my dad. I said, look, a group of Cessnas, right? And I could show you this photo. And you could say, look, I can't promise you there's little green men from Mars in there. I have no idea. It could be some government aircraft we're not supposed to know about, but it is not, absolutely not a group of Cessnas. And in that case, the official explanation really added a lot more credence to something way weirder than anyone was comfortable with. And I'll never forget that too, right? So we have these experiences, and they change your worldview and perspective. That you're just like, oh, we really don't know everything that's in our skies. We just don't. And and now today, as you said, we all have phones on us now. We all have cameras. So a lot more of that stuff is coming forward, but a lot of fake stuff's coming forward too.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's
the pain, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
all the AI and crap that we're flooded with that obfuscates the truth behind it. That's the annoying thing.
Had I run in and got the old VHS camera, that's the size of like, and filmed it, back in the 1980s, you'd say, wow, well, that's not
Wow,
AI.
it's blurry. Yeah.
Yeah, blurry and shaky and wow, but didn't have it.
Have you got that picture? Could you send it over to me after this?
I do.
I'll
Yeah.
put it on screen during your story because I'd love to see that
Yeah,
photo.
for sure. I can. It's Randy Edding took that.
Oh, amazing! Yeah, I look forward to getting hold of that one. I've never had a UFO experience, and I don't feel left out, by the way, because I also think it opens up another world that could be quite scary in some respects if you go down the abduction route and stuff. Yeah.
Well,
And
sure.
I don't want to
right.
go there.
Yeah.
But I also do want to see one at the same time. It's a weird contradiction.
But
Right,
but don't you feel the same about ghosts? Don't you want to see one?
Yes and no. It's probably the same thing. I know they
Okay.
exist, right? Because I could go into family history. My brother's a medium. My nan's a medium. I know they don't lie to me, yeah? And all the people I've spoken to down the years, all the researchers and everything, we're not all liars in the whole world, so there's truth to it. Do I need to see one to know it's true? No, because I trust people.
Okay. I did. I'm
Yeah.
the doubting Thomas of the disciples, I guess.
I would like to, because I know it does that thing like I said to you earlier. Seeing is knowing. You can
Yeah.
believe in a subject, but it's the knowing is the real, I don't know, depth to it, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? So, over the years, I've done many, many events where we bring people to haunted places. Many of those with Dave Schrader, by the way. The shenanigans! I can't even tell you. So,
He told me some great fart stories.
yeah. Oh God, did he tell you about Al Capone's cell? And
Yeah,
yeah.
it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. We have
Is
that
that
in
a
common with
demon?
Al Capone. So yeah, no. But they're this is fascinating. Riddle me this, right? So we'll take people to Eastern State Penitentiary, the oldest penitentiary in the U.S. in Philadelphia. Really, great old prison, great old haunt. Al Capone had a cell there, as Dave told you about, and haunted through and through. We'll bring people in, and there are people that will start to say, I think my grandmother's here. And you'll say, wow, was your grandma in prison here? Did she work here? Did she have some connection? She's never even been to Pennsylvania, right? And you go, oh, why would your grandma be coming through to you in a prison in Pennsylvania where she never lived, where you never lived, whatever. And I think the answer to that, we're going to jump back to Ouija boards, right?
Okay, cool.
So you pull a Ouija board off your shelf in, the Parker Brothers game or Hasbro or whichever version you have, and you're with your friends, and you take it out of the box and you put the cardboard thing down and the plastic planchette and you start to ask questions, and maybe you have an experience and you go, whoa, I'm uncomfortable, right? I'm talking, how does it know that I have a brother? How does it know that this about my life or whatever? And you get nervous and you close the box and you put it back on the shelf. There is nothing magical about cardboard and plastic, nothing at all, right? The experience is it was you, right? You are the one having a psychic experience. I believe we all have these abilities and intuitions, right? But they're kept in a closet. But you pull out something like a Ouija board, and suddenly you're opening yourself up to that part of us that's probably there all the time. We just don't really think about it. So you're the compass, that's the needle. And so when you bring people to a haunted building, or one that they know is haunted, they've seen it on TV from like 6 different shows, like Eastern State Penitentiary. All the ghost hunting shows have been there. So they're in that place where they know other people have had an experience, and suddenly they're open, just like pulling the Ouija board out of the box. Suddenly they're in an open place that they're not usually open, and stuff that maybe is around them all the time, relatives or whatever, are starting to come through, because we're now in a place where we're open to that sort of experience. That's fascinating to me too. I can't explain it. I don't know. I even had someone tell me their dead dog was coming through. I don't know, right? I wasn't having the experience, but I can't call them a liar either,
Well, this point about location, it might not be that the location's doing it, it's just you're in a different mindset at that location.
I'm sure that's what it is, right? You don't think about that at the grocery store, but you do think about it in a creepy old prison at night in the dark.
Yeah, it's intention, isn't it? I think a lot of it's to do with intention.
Sure.
Or seems to be. Do you think ghosts have a purpose, or are they just a feature or a flaw in the system, so to speak? The system being what we see around us.
They always have a purpose. They never don't, without exception. It's impossible, right? So one of my favorite tropes with haunted legends, right, is the unfinished business trope. That one rings true to me like I can't tell you. However, I think most people think of it the wrong way. They think the ghost has unfinished business. The ghost does not have unfinished business. The ghost business is concluded. We have unfinished business. For example, I live about an hour away from the Lizzie Borden house in Massachusetts, Fall River, where we have a nursery rhyme about it, right? Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Right? So
what a wonderful tale. Yeah.
Isn't that great? You have Ring Around the Rosie, which is just as sick, but
we have all plague ones. Yeah, I know.
That's the plague, right? Ours is murder. Whatever. Potato. So the Lizzie Borden, that is absolutely unfinished business. 2 people were murdered in that house. Absolutely happened. We don't know who did it. No one was ever punished for it. We have our very strong suspicions, but no one was punished for a crime that took place in 1892. And that haunts us. It will always haunt us. We have unfinished business. Someone got away with murder, double murder, and we don't like it one bit. Now, whether Lizzie's still sticking around, or Andrew Borden or Abby Borden, I don't know. But I do know that we have unfinished business with that property. And so we keep conjuring it up. We keep wondering, pondering, exploring, investigating, asking for motives and all that other stuff, because it won't leave us alone. And that's a ghost, right? A ghost goes away when we stop talking about it. And think about this, there seems to be a life cycle to a ghost. We will absolutely talk about ghosts 100, 150 years. Once it gets to be too far removed, though, like, there's not enough connection. We don't think about them. We let them go. Think about where you are, right? I mean, how far back do the ghosts go? A few centuries, right? A couple of exceptions. There's always exceptions.
Romans mainly, I think we often see.
Romans are 2,000 years, right? But does it go much further back than that?
Well, I'm not seeing a Stone Age ghost, am I? No one.
No one talks about seeing the Neanderthal ghost, right? It's just and even Romans is pushing it over here. there's a few stories of like Native American, like First Nations ghosts, but for the most part, and even colonial times, like 16, 1700s, um, fading. There's a few, but Civil War era, mid 1800s to early 1900s, there's the bulk. And my suspicion, and I will literally die before I can prove this to you, is that that time period will move, right? So the 9/11 site in New York City, I have no doubt that it's haunted and haunting, but that's crass. It was only 20 something years ago that all those people died so tragically. However, a century from now, you don't think there's going to be people feeling all kinds of things around that site? Of course they will, right? Enough time will have passed. There's enough distance and space where you can talk about it without it feeling so crass, without survivors, spouses and children standing near you saying, "How dare you dishonor?" Which, by the way, I think most of us are not trying to dishonor anybody. But I understand how it can be interpreted that way. Yeah, because I define a ghost simply as the past coming to the present. Other people define ghosts as some soul that can't leave the earth with unfinished business, and they're bound here. And how dare you imply my dad, my mom, my sister, brother, whatever is such a ghost. And first of all, I don't even buy into that at all because I've never found a place that's haunted all the time. Because if I did, I'd buy it and I would charge you a fortune to go see it. I'd be like, Koit, how much money you got? You want to see my guaranteed ghost behind the door? Pay up.
I got a few coins over here, but they're not worth a lot, but I'll give them to you.
A few quid, that's it.
A few quid here and there. I might have a couple of questions for you then. Right,
Sure.
It's going to sort of like offset the intention thing that I said earlier versus location. And I asked this question of a chap called Nick Kyle. If you have a haunted place and we go in and demolish it, is that ghost still there in that space that was there? Do you know what I mean? So say it's a second floor ghost. Is it then still up there in the sky on that? Is that there?
Great
or
question.
Is it because we've demolished it? Is it gone? Is it forgotten? Do you know what I mean?
I do. So, yeah, it's still there, but the connection is highly severed because the context, the stage with the setting and everything has been removed. But I would guess that the sightings would be much less frequent. Here's an example. I got to interview a woman in Tennessee, and her house was built in something like 1970 or 80. Modern, very modern.
Mm-hmm.
No one died there, as far as she knows, and I probably not. Her house had one of those basements that have the windows at the very top. Just at the very top you can just see a little bit out into the yard. And she said she'd be down in the basement doing laundry, and she would see feet walking maybe 2 feet above the grass, like cool. Disembodied legs. And she did some research and learned that was once a Civil War field hospital, the land she's on, and the yard would have been graded, by backhoes and stuff when they built the modern house. She believes what she saw, like that's probably where the land was, up a couple of feet from where the grass is now. And she suspects she was seeing a sort of replay of the past, of people walking around when this was a Civil War field hospital. So her new house, where nobody died, the land anyway, seems to be haunted.
Right, which leads directly into the next question then, which is, she wouldn't have thought about those Civil War people just walking by, would she? So that intention thing of us remembering and then that brings them to us, so to speak, that's not her link. So is somebody else in the street thinking about the Civil War sort of thing? Or
it's a movie playing over and over, and she got the frequency right for that moment. But here's the thing I love the best about hauntings and ghosts, right, is because I also love history. If you tell me that building across the street is haunted, the next question out of my mouth is going to be why, right? And to answer that, we got to go back. We got to talk to people. How long has it been here? What kind of events have taken place inside? Who's lived here? Who's died here? Who's been through? What connection does it have with whatever ghost might be there? And that's the holy grail, right? When you can go back and you can say, oh, maybe we can put a name to it. And by the way, we're speculating, of course. If there's a knock on the wall, then, something I coined, it's not catching on though, whatever, maybe it will one day. I call it most famous phenomenon, which, so for example, there are bed and breakfasts all over Virginia. And a lot of them have these signs, these historic signs that say George Washington slept here, right?
Oh
And
yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, we have them in England as well.
of course, yeah, of course, and it's a neat thing. It's wonderful. Some of them have been around since the 1700s. Some of them have haunted reputations. Knocks on the wall, footsteps. Who do you think the ghost is, Koit?
I'm gonna guess Steve, but it could be Dave, couldn't it?
No, it's George Washington.
Oh, is it?
Obviously,
Obviously.
the most famous
for.
person.
Yeah.
The most famous person who's ever been in the building is the one haunting it. He might have slept there one night in 1780, was getting home late, figured he'd just crash there, hit the road in the morning and be back on his way. But that's where he's going to spend his eternity, is haunting, that building. But that's sexier than saying it was Steve, who was the gardener on the roof, who was drunk and fell off and broke his neck, right,
Poor
in 1950.
Steve. Yeah.
So that's the, but that's the thing. And not only that, when we put a name to the ghost, it gives us a sense of control. It's a false sense of control. I mean, we could be fooling ourselves, but it makes us feel better. George Washington would never hurt me. It's got to be him who's walking up and down, on the stairwell as I'm trying to sleep in this old bed and breakfast in Virginia.
That's a good point you make about that, actually. There's no way of proving it's X, Y, or Z. But
No.
presumably you've brought a shed load of mediums in on some of your adventures down the years. Do they ever give what you would class as, yes, there's confirmation that it is Dave or Steve?
They do, but I don't always believe them.
Okay.
So, I mean, again, the skepticism, I've had mediums say, there's a ghost in a red dress, a little girl right behind you. I'll turn around. I'll look, right? If I don't see it, we're now having a different experience. You know what I mean? You are having a unique experience compared to me, and my brain can't get there, right? There's no reason to lie to me, but at the same time, I can't confirm it either. So, yes, there's been plenty of people. There's been plenty of mediums that go to the Lizzie Borden house and have postulated some really awful motives for that murder, right? Stuff that I won't even repeat because I can't prove it. And it's the kind of thing that utterly destroys the reputation of a human being. It would certainly be a motive, but I don't know if it's right. And so that's the kind of thing I'm going to keep to myself. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, it can be just speculation at the end of the day, isn't it? And that means
of course,
nothing, I
because
suppose.
look, we all do. When we meet someone on the street, we're inventing backstory about them instantly. Are they wearing designer clothes and a really expensive flashy watch? Are the slick back hair? And you start making up the story oh, you're a rich kid who grew up wealthy and had everything handed to you. You might be right. You could be wrong. They could be self-made or whatever, but there's a really good chance you're right, because we've encountered enough people. Once you're once you've had a few years of experience in this world, you've encountered enough people to know the types. And so we're reading that person and we're getting a vibe off of them. Sometimes you meet someone and the vibe is wow, we'd be friends, or maybe it's attraction. Maybe there's a potential partner there, right? You're oh, wow, I'm really attracted to you. You seem, oh, good, there's a thing here. Or you're repulsed by somebody and you can't explain why. All they said was hello. Hi, nice to meet you. And you're ugh, that's our intuition kicking in. And maybe it's wrong, but it's probably more often than not toward the right way, right? I mean, that's how we survive.
Earlier, I was looking at you and I thought, does he hate me?
No.
You don't? Oh, I thought you were. Yeah, you're definitely. Does he hate me? Yeah, we do.
No. No.
Good man.
I don't. See, but
have-
you got it. That's why we talk, we communicate, we get it out.
Bang on.
Before it becomes a thing. Enough of that time goes by and you're no, he really hates me. That'll just build.
Yeah.
That will
that
build
tension.
until it's diffused. Yeah.
I have a question for you about your ghost sighting earlier, the Black Shadow Man or whatever you want to call it.
Catacombs, yeah.
Catacombs guy. Did he walk through the wall from the left and through the wall on the right, or was it just there on the left to just there on the right?
So it was almost as if there was a tunnel, so part of him disappeared on my left, his right, and then he went back to where he came from. So it almost, if there was an opening on either side, it would have made sense, like there and then right back. But there was no opening. It was straight all the way to the very end of the, very end of the tunnel. So yes, partially disappeared a little bit when it went to my left, his right, and then back again.
Had you pondered looking into seeing if the plans for the catacombs had changed down the years to prove that one way or the other?
I haven't truly. I mean, it's those bones, because there's I don't know if you've ever been down there, but there's
I've not, no.
yeah, I mean, it's worth it. You're not too far away. You can take the tunnel. But there's signs within the bones that will tell you which cemetery they came from and what year they were placed down there. So the thing about the catacombs, part of the reason they're there is that two big problems. Paris had tunneled all under the city to get all that great limestone to build with. 300 kilometers of tunnels, right? And the cemeteries, which were put on the outskirts of town early on, weren't the outskirts anymore. Paris sprawls, right? There's a couple of tall buildings, but that's it. It mainly just sprawls and sprawls. So it encircled the cemeteries, and there was no room to bury the dead by the 1700s into the 1800s. So the corpses are literally putrefying and leaking into the streets, and buildings are starting to collapse because the ground underneath is hollow. So they had to shore up those tunnels and empty the cemeteries. Could there have been tunnels in before, mid 1800s when those bones were brought down? Sure, could have been, absolutely. Those tunnels were used for all kinds of things. The French underground in World War II, and so on. But yeah, so no, I didn't look into it exactly that spot. I think at the time I was so just awestruck by what I was seeing. It didn't even occur to me. It was just, I saw a thing. This is it. I finally had my experience.
It was just wow, not logic per se.
Because I've been in plenty of those types of places, and it overwhelming majority of the time it doesn't happen. Like I don't see ghosts. And you name the place, like I've gone in all kinds of spots all over the world, and it's never my expectation. So when it does happen, I don't forget it.
No, I bet. Yeah, I'm also a non-see ghost person, so I think if anything stuck out for me, I'd also, what the, you know what I mean?
Well, but also too, like, I'm grateful I'm the way I am. I can't help it anyway, so I might as well live with it. But I know people that claim they see spirits and ghosts everywhere they go. And whether they really do or not, I don't know. But at the same time, if they do, it must be maddening, right? It must be, are you in the grocery store like pushing people on the shoulder like, oh yeah, okay.
That's what I said to somebody a couple of weeks ago. I said, if you're seeing ghosts all the time, it must. Are you real? Are you real?
Yeah.
How could you live like that? It's weird, isn't it?
Of course, there's that scene in the original Ghostbusters movie where he's got the PK meter down in the library, and there's a librarian standing there staring at him, and he just pushes her shoulder. Right? I love that. Like, moving on. Yeah, it would be. I mean, I can't relate to it, so I couldn't possibly know. But at the same time, and some of the mediums and folks that I've talked to say that they can sort of switch it off just for their own sanity, and they can sort of open it up and be more open, and they can close it down with exceptions, obviously. But yeah.
I'm going to switch tack slightly with you now to move into websites and your entertainment career. So let's talk about ghostvillage.com. It's one of your many websites. What is the story of that site?
So that I started Ghost Village in 1999. I had written for a newspaper in the mid 90s, and we were an arts and entertainment paper. It was such a great time of my life. But around October, I loved writing features, and I'd go looking for haunted stories. And my first one was an interview with Ed and Lorraine Warren for the paper. And then I started working on a ghost town in Connecticut called Dudleytown. And the newspaper went under, as so many of them did. It went out of business, and we had a website. This was the very early days of the web, and they said, wow, your paranormal articles got like twice the traffic of all the other articles combined. And I went, oh, cool. So I wanted to learn HTML. And so I started Ghost Village, and I just put up a couple of articles I'd written, and I just said, tell me about your ghost experiences, just email me. And I would get one or two a month, people would just email and say, hey, this happened to me, and I'd put it up on the website. And then I would get one or two a week where more and more people from all over the world were sharing their stories, and this vast collection started to form. And then I started reviewing books on the paranormal and talking to, I started a message board back when message boards were a thing. And it just kept expanding until I started writing my own books in 2004. And that was always kind of like the home base of everything I've done ghostly over the years. And it's still up, 26 years later, still going. And there's not too many websites older than Ghost Village at this point.
No, I imagine not. Is it like a database now of all ghost tales?
Yeah, it's the main feature is people writing about their experiences. But here's the other thing that happened. I've been around long enough to watch this happen. Message boards all went away. Nobody used them because they all moved over to Facebook or MySpace or whatever, right? Like that became the place where you would share your stories. The other thing that happened, which is such a disappointment to me, is that, people used to write me paragraphs, pages of their experience with all kinds of details. Sometimes I'd reply and ask for more details, pages and pages. And now the few that I get are maybe 2 sentences and have like no meat on those bones at all. People don't have the attention span to sit and write what happened to them. And I suspect it's because most people are using their phones and nobody wants to write a short article on their phones with their thumbs,
Text
right?
generation, isn't it, as well?
Yeah. And so sadly, a lot has been lost. And then for younger people, they're sharing their experiences on TikTok videos and reels on Instagram and stuff like that, which is fine, by the way. I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon. I'm just noticing the change, right? How people have expressed this. And but if you're on TikTok or Instagram, you really want to get eyes on you as opposed to sharing information. And so your motives become a little more cloudy than emailing me. And I would always withhold their name if they asked. I prefer they didn't, but if they said, please withhold my name, but this was the date of the encounter, this was the location, and this is what happened, with some detail. And then that got other people writing, oh, something just like that happened to me, but I was here, and this is what I saw, and this is what I experienced. And I love that. I love the community that it built over the years, and it became the foundation of everything that I do. It's just the world's changed quite a bit, and people don't share information that way anymore, which is too bad. Not to say we can't go back, but as of this minute, we have not.
I know. I think that's a shame because if you look at it as a collection, technically, of anecdotes, but it's data.
Yeah.
If we can somehow look at that, I don't know. Have you looked at patterns in that data to see if there's something that sticks out there?
So the patterns I would look at as like a total armchair sociologist, right, is the types of encounters there were. For example, the ghost of the living person, the woman in Australia who I got to correspond with about seeing the doppelganger, her son seeing her doppelganger. So I noticed those started to show up. There are patterns of where it is very much what we might call like a residual haunting, a movie that just plays over and over, where people would say, in this place, people see this one thing. There was often the most common experience was a loved one, was usually someone that was close to them who had passed, and shortly thereafter had some sort of visitation. And it was usually a very heartwarming message of closure. It was sort of just like, I didn't get the goodbye, but there was grandma in my kitchen. She smiled at me and then slowly faded. And I felt like that was the goodbye I didn't get. And I'm like, that's wonderful. How awesome. That's what a great thing. But then once in a while, there was some that really didn't fit into traditional molds. And we can't help but want to put all these things into categories. Something I would call a time slip, right? Where you're the ghost, which is wild.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I spoke to, there was a guy in Cambridge, right near Boston, where I'm pretty close to where I am now. He was telling me it was like 1987, and he and his friend wanted to play tennis. And so they'd heard there were courts in this certain neighborhood, so they drove down the street. They're trying to find the courts. They saw a police officer standing on the corner and thought he looked kind of strange, like old-timey, but they pulled up, and they said that the police officer looked at him kind of funny too, and pulled up in his car and said, hey, do you know where the tennis courts are? And he said, yeah, it's just down, 2 blocks on the right or whatever. And they said, okay. He said, so we get there. and there's the tennis courts. And we parked the car, and he said the strange thing was all the courts were full, and everybody was wearing tennis whites. White shirt, white pants, white dresses, skirts. Very old fashioned. And they said, oh, there must be some club here or something, and we're going to have to wait for a tennis court. So they both get out of the car, they shut the door, and the tennis courts are gone. They're not there anymore. It's just an empty sort of like, rundown, section of concrete and trees and garbage and so on. And then they look at each other and said, there were tennis courts here when we pulled in. The cop told us how to find them. And then we looked it up. There were tennis courts there. They had been removed in like the 1970s. So that's the story. Take from it what you will. But if anything, they were the ghosts. Like the modern people were the ghosts invading a scene that would have made sense, 30 years earlier, but didn't make sense at that time. And that's just one example. There were others where you just go, well, what is that? Was that the bubbles, right? The
overlapping. Now, here's a question on that time slip phenomenon, and I'm sure I've asked this with other guests as well. But from that cop's perspective, has there ever been stories like that where he's mentioned a story of seeing ghosts, i.e., it could be those two people in that car, and then somehow 30 years apart they merge, and you go, whoa, there's the start, there's the end. Have we ever got anything like that?
I have not been able to close the loop. That would be amazing. That would be truly amazing. To be able to close a loop like that. That's a real needle in a haystack sort of thing, right?
Almost impossible, but
yeah, almost impossible. But if it ever comes up, you'll know, because I'll shout that one from the rooftops, because I love that. I love when you can put specific names and dates on things. It's really something special, to be able to do that. I'd say with certainty, but in this business, nothing's ever certain, but probability, probable is pretty good too.
Yeah, definitely. Have you got any other favorite cases from your Ghost Village site that stuck out to you over the years? Any classics?
Oh, so many, I mean, it's I adore when people would kind of like really bare their soul over something personal, because I think most ghost experiences are personal, right? There's a reason that you're experiencing it right now, right here in this time and place. Like I don't think it's accidental. I think there's reasons beyond your control and understanding. And when someone can just be that honest, it's enlightening. And there was a lot of examples of those. Like I said, usually with loved ones. There was one, I loved it. He said, this guy was a biker, rode motorcycles, And he said one of his really good friends died in a motorcycle accident. And he said, I never got to say goodbye. And he said, I was sitting there. He was sitting at his dining room table working on his taxes or something. And his dining room table faces the front window. And just beyond that is the sidewalk right in front of his house. Okay. And then he said he watched his friend walk by, look at the window, give him one of these like finger point waves, and just kept walking. And he said, I dropped my pen and I laughed and I cried at the same time, right? Like that was perfect. He said, that's the thing I needed. My buddy knew it. He gave it to me. That was the perfect goodbye. Not some sobby, hug me kind of thing. Just a, hey, partner, I'm still around somewhere, And I love that. I love the idea that, and that gives me hope, right? Because maybe, who knows what happens to each of us. But the idea that I could still have some influence, or give someone that incredible gift, which is so simple. A wave, Koit. That's it.
Well, do you know, people who do that are really cool. I mean, I do that, so it must be true.
Of course they do, yeah. Right?
Yo.
So, yeah, love that. I like a gesture that simple that could change someone's life forever. That's cool.
So you sort of like hinted at it there. Do you want to come back as a ghost to do stuff like that?
Oh, God, yes. Yes. As long as they'll have me. I want to haunt everybody all the time. I want to be on all the TV shows if there's any left by then. I want to get like good concert tickets. I'll be in the front row and all that other stuh.
As long as you're just not the one that is just the foul smell.
Yeah, that'll be me too.
Yeah.
Like with Dave Schrader, he'll be like, "Oh, Jeff's around.
Oh, Jeff's here. Yeah, gross.
I know that scent." Al Capone. Yeah.
Beauty in action. Let's move into your entertainment career then. So your TV and film work How did that journey begin?
So I started, well, Ghost Village started it all, and then I started writing books in 2004. And then that led to me, once in a while when you got a book out, a TV show or two might want to interview you for as like a talking head. And then I started working on Ghost Adventures back in 2008, and I was called in. They had already filmed the documentary, which aired on the Sci-Fi Channel over here, and they just got picked up into a series. 8 episodes on the Travel Channel was all it was going to be. And they said they needed someone who knew haunted places all over and could help with research and writing and history and finding witnesses. And Zach knew Dave Schrader, and Dave's like, "You got to call Jeff. He's your guy." So Zach called me, and I thought, "Oh, cool! I've done this for magazines, newspapers, the web, just never television, just a different medium. Let's do it." And it was just supposed to be 8 episodes, and that was 17 years ago. And the show has not stopped filming since. So that's been great to be part of that. And it's over there. I forget which channel airs it in the UK, but yeah, so it's been really cool to be part of that. It's allowed me to do lots of other fun projects. I started my own New England Legends for where I live. We did that for PBS, which is our public broadcasting station, which means no money, just all dream, like all friends and favors. And I have a compulsion to sort of like to share and tell these stories. It's what I do. It's my life's work. And any way I can do that, I want to do it.
Quality. I was thinking about this the other day, actually, which is why people do things, right? Like investigations and the work you're doing. What is their motivation? Is it for a personal journey of knowledge, or are they going to be like you, where you want to push it out to people? Your goal is to share. Do you think most people are the share type, or are they the personal keep type?
I think we want to find our kindred spirits too, right? You want someone else to say like, I had an experience like that. You're not crazy. It's happened to me too. So you want that there's a sense of belonging in a community when you share, which is good. I think there's a very few people that do it for like fame or fortune because there's just no fortune to be had. And only a handful of people really got famous doing this, and who they are. They're on TV shows, right? Like that's it. So so it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky way to make a living. And I know this is going to it's probably going to sound pretentious, which God, it's the last thing on earth I'd ever want to be. But in more recent years, I really think of what I do as more art than anything else. Like I'm a story collector and teller. Like that's what I've always been. I just sort of accepted it more recently. And I also believe that in a very weird way, um, ghosts and hauntings and legends from the past are like a sermon that we have not reconciled with yet, which would make me a bit of a minister, which I know is really strange, but that would
Ghost
make
minister, yeah.
yeah, like make you one too, right? Because you're collecting these stories and
Yeah,
you're talking
yeah.
about the subject. So in a way, we become ministers of this unfinished business, and we talk about it because the reality is history repeats itself. For example, when I do a weekly podcast called New England Legends, I've been doing it for 7 years now. And it was a spinoff of the TV show, that we started. And we do every kind of weirdness. We do UFOs and aliens and ghosts and monsters, cryptids, Bigfoot, roadside oddities, anything strange. New England has a few very prominent vampire stories
Ooh.
from our past. And the most famous would be Mercy Brown, who was a young girl that was exhumed in 1892 because it was suspected that she was a vampire. Before, Bram Stoker wrote Dracula, before Nosferatu, before all that stuff, vampires used to be much more closely aligned with our modern idea of a zombie, like a mindless like feeding machine, but they would feed on the vitality of the living, right? Walking corpses, not sexy, not pretty. They didn't turn into bats. They were draining and infecting others. And the way you dealt with them was if you could find the source vampire, the original, you would dig them up. You might put a stake through their heart, but that had more to do with nailing the body down so it couldn't get up, or put a brick in its mouth, or disrupt its bones, or flip it upside down, or burn it. Any number of things that you would do, and they always were around with times of plagues. So in the 1800s, the plague of the time was consumption, tuberculosis, right? It ravaged the world, you know, and some communities were really hard hit. And even though they very much understood contagion in the 1800s, you know, a kid comes in with a cold, pretty soon everyone in the house gets it. That's not new. People understood that for a long time. And even though you could explain that consumption, tuberculosis, is a bacteria that can get into your lungs and infect you and literally eat you away and waste you away from the inside, when it actually hits, people lose a lot of rationality because they're scared and because they love the people around them and they want to keep them safe. And so you'll try anything, including taking your own daughter's body out of the keep where she's been all winter, surgically removing her heart, burning it into ashes, mixing it into an oily elixir and feeding it to your son, who's also sick, in the hopes that this long shot folklore remedy will cure him, right? And you can say that sounds absolutely, you know, bat crazy, but if you are a parent and you have a 1 in a million chance of saving a dying child of yours, I don't care who you are, you're going to try it, right? So that story, which is sort of quaint in our modern times, well, when COVID hit,
Yeah, batshit crazy people came out then, didn't they?
I was like, wait a minute. We've been here before. This has happened before. We just weren't alive. Our grandparents, you know, well, some of our grandparents might have been barely alive. So we started telling these stories of New England vampires, saying people were so scared of a pandemic contagion that was going around that they were digging up bodies, burning them, ripping the hearts out, crushing the bones, just decapitating the corpse, because they tried everything else. And the minister said, pray. And the doctor said, you know, wash your hands. But neither of those was good enough. So, you know, we started some crazy stuff. So when COVID happened, those stories suddenly became highly relevant and in our modern times. I'm like, now, like maybe if Mercy Brown, if they'd only hoarded toilet paper, you know,
Yeah.
Did you even try that? Did you think maybe if we have all the rolls of toilet paper in town, then we'd be safe?
Do you know what happened in my supermarket? I was walking with Tiff one day. We were going around with our stupid masks on, and there was one cart. A lady must have had like 50 to 100 tomato soups in her cart, and I'm like,
Yeah.
"What are you doing? Come
Yeah.
on!"
Yeah. Well, but because she's scared. That's
know,
why
I
she
get
did
it.
it. She's scared, and she'd rather she have it than someone else. And if she can keep her loved ones and herself safe and locked inside, then that's what she's going to do. It's not rational, and in hindsight, it was not necessary, even selfish and terrible. Like you kept the soup away from other people that could have needed the vitamin C and everything else that's in it. But at the same time, she did her best. And that's what we learned in that pandemic. So whatever is happening historically, for example, right now we are living in a time where the gap between the haves and the have-nots is growing really wide. And historically speaking, every time that happens, it doesn't go well.
No, it's
It's
a
really,
collapse,
really
yeah.
bad. Yeah, people, right?
Yeah,
And
very
in fact,
quickly.
it happened a few weeks ago. I don't know how much play this story got over there when the CEO of a healthcare company was
Oh
shot.
yeah, got shot. That's right. Yeah.
This has happened before. This is not surprising, right? Ask our French friends, right? Let them eat cake.
Well, it's
Let
like
them
you
eat
said
cake.
earlier, the patterns, you know, time repeats or whatever. I don't know whether it's a circular thing. I think it's more like a spiral. So it
Right.
rhymes, you know, but we do progress forward, but it does rhyme big time.
Of course it does. So
Yeah.
whatever's happened has happened before in some way, shape, or form. And if we can be haunted by some of those events, like maybe some ghostly guillotines lopping off heads of nobles in France could start haunting people that are in charge of billions of dollars and our healthcare and our livelihoods and so on. And they could start going, ugh, maybe I could make a few billion less. You know, maybe I can be a little more fair before that scene starts to become a reality again. That's the value of these stories. That's the unfinished business. The business isn't finished because it happened again, right? Here we are again.
So it's a message of learning then, isn't it? Essentially, that's what this is all about.
Of course. And every one of us, we are a byproduct of not just the people who raised us, of course, mostly them, but the people who raised them and the people who raised them. There are echoes of your great, great, great grandparents in you, and you don't even know where they came from, right? There are traits you have, whether physically, whether it's eye color or stature or whatever, or even personality traits. Your parents don't even know where it came from, but go back far enough and you'll find them. And
I know I must have got this absolute pure beauty from somewhere, mustn't I?
of course, obviously. But that's the thing, right? So all of us, we're an interconnected species. We just are. We're connected to each other. We're connected to our past. We're connected to where we are, where we live, where we visit, all that stuff. It all has an influence. It's an intertwined fabric. And I think ghosts, legends, haunted places, all that stuff, when we discuss it, it allows us to have very deep, meaningful conversations without busting open really touchy subjects. For example, if I said, Koit, let's talk about my religion, you'd be like, oh, no, 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 no. You'd be squirming. Let's not do that. That's awful. What are the chances we're going to agree? But if I said, hey, let me tell you this weird ghost experience that happened to me, it's fine. Because if you're skeptical, you could say, it's just a story. You seem like a nice enough bloke, but, I don't necessarily agree with you, right? But maybe you've had an experience yourself where you could say, no, that's happened to me too. And I get exactly what you're talking about. And I know where you're coming from. And I also believe, and here we are. It allows us to keep these big subjects like death. You can't talk about a ghost without someone dying. Like that's the elephant in the room. Someone has to die, usually, unless it's, ghost of a living person, as we said before. So, death is a very uncomfortable subject to talk about. But we could talk about ghosts because the story still has value. The legend always has value. Otherwise, I assure you, it just goes away. It's not up to me. It's not up to me what place gets haunted or not haunted or what story sticks around. It's a collective. It's a community that decides we're going to keep talking about the Lizzie Borden house. We're not done with it yet. We're going to keep talking about the Tower of London and Anne Boleyn's, headless ghost. We're going to keep talking about Jack the Ripper. Because serial killers
never go away. That one,
yeah. Never, right? I mean, of course not, because he's an icon, and
it's not
he's
been
not
solved.
The last.
It's that simple, isn't it? It's not been solved.
When it's solved, that's another way to kill a legend, right? If you can write the ending of the chapter, but also there will be more serial killers. Like he won't be the last, so we keep his story around as a reminder. Watch your back.
Yeah, these people are out there. Do you have an aim in your life in relation to either the paranormal or the entertainment side of things that you write for, etc.?
Oh, well, I mean, the entertainment stuff. Excuse me, I've been talking all morning.
It's okay. You're also drinking out of a jar, so that must be moonshine.
It's absolutely moonshine, which means I should be snockered by now, right? So, yeah, I mean, I get it. It's a complicated question. I earn my living doing this. So how can you trust me? I mean, I get it. I totally get it. When I work on the television shows are meant to entertain. And Ghost Adventures is not my baby. I'm not a producer. I'm just the researcher and writer. And what they do with that is, what they do with it. And if people watch or whatever, like, hey, that's my day job and I'm grateful for it. And I'm also grateful that show has helped propel the subject into the popular culture to the point where we can talk about it more openly.
Definitely.
My books are my own. They don't pay very well, but they're deeply personal, and when I do talks and lectures and my podcast and stuff like that, like those are my passion projects, and that's me, and I get it. I get that it gets different when someone's earning their living off of it. But it's also
I don't necessarily believe that's true.
Okay.
And I'll tell you the reason why, right? I'm a musician also, right? And I like to write music, but if I make money off it, it doesn't change how I am as a person or my music. Do you know what I mean? Right. So I can see that you need to make a living, so I don't see that as a problem in the slightest. The real truth is the core of you and what your intentions are, I always think. And like you said a minute ago, you have an aim, your passion projects to release your books. That's what I'm massively interested in.
Yeah. So no, for sure. Yes. The passion projects are like, actually, if I could only do one thing, I would be in front of live audiences sharing the story live in person. I do like 60 to 80 of those a year,
That's
and
a lot. Whoa.
I wish it was more. I'm
Whoa.
starting to do more stuff in theaters now and share these stories. That's my favorite because when you read my book, I don't get to sit in your lap and say, "Is this sentence good? Did you like this page? You know, what'd you think of that?" Which would be awkward, you know, for you.
Yeah, please don't do that.
For you, it'd be awkward. I'd be fine with it, but whatever. Um, but when you're in front of a live audience, there's you're a musician. Have you performed in front of people?
Years ago, yes, but not.
But you must
keyboards and stuff.
remember there's an energetic
Oh yeah,
exchange, right?
proper.
You can go out one night and the crowd is dead, and you're like, oh, this hurts, right? And another night, the crowd is just with you, and I'm just surfing, right? I'm literally just riding this wave. I got nothing to do but enjoy this, you know? That's the beauty of the performance, right? Where you share stories and the audience shares energy back, and you get to have this like discussion, and people leave like any good performance. The audience leaves changed, right? They leave different than when they came in whatever way that is, and you know, and some more than others, and some less than others. But that's the beauty, right, of the sermon, I guess.
Yeah, well, what you've just reminded me is exactly what we talked about earlier, which is that bit there is the ghost. Because you've then used that message of being a ghost. We'll just talk about you being on stage as a ghost, you know, it's just metaphorically. Sure. The people in the audience have received that message through energy. Do you see what I mean? I love that.
So I've always said, like, I don't think there are ghosts in a vacuum, right? If there's a haunted abandoned house somewhere out there in the woods, there's no ghost there until you add a living human into the recipe. Even if you put a camera in there, you're still in there by proxy, right?
The observer effect, yeah.
Yeah, there's someone. So I think we summon them, right? And I know that sounds like very like woo woo and crystal ball and whatever, but we summon them for reasons we don't even know. You know, if we're in a building and something happens, we are having an experience where we're calling that past to the present, even if it's a subconscious thing, and then you know from there you may or may not have an experience.
I like that. That's a good one to think about, isn't it? That there are no say if we all died on the earth, every single person, there would be zero ghosts because in theory there's no observer to see that ghost.
That's what I think. Yeah, there's no ghosts in space.
No, unless you watch that film Life Force. No, that was Vampires in Space. If you remember
Vampires in Space.
Life Force.
Well, that's the thing, right? So, right. No, I don't believe that they're in a vacuum. I don't believe that, so I remember taking a communications course in college, right? And communication requires a minimum of two people, two parties, at least. There could be more. There's a broadcaster and a recipient, and that's the bare minimum of what you need. So if there's a ghost in a building that's abandoned and there's no human around for miles, is there a ghost? Does it matter? Right? And I know it's a very egocentric way to look at the world. And I'll give you another example that's more down to earth. You know, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? I think the answer to that question is it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right?
True.
That's the honest answer.
Unless you're the squirrel living in that tree, and then
yeah, it matters to the squirrel.
Yeah.
But whether it makes a sound or not is irrelevant because I didn't hear it.
Correct.
You know, and I wasn't there to hear it. So it might not have. It's Schrodinger's cat. It's alive.
You could also parse that out to like the fact that everything is so interconnected nowadays. Right? We've got more news hitting us 24/7, and that's the reason everyone's pissed off or worried about everything is because you've been bombarded with it. Years ago, when I grew up, like probably the same time as you did in the 80s, we didn't have that constant stream, so you had zero worry. You're out doing things.
So humans have never been forced to take in so much information as we are right now. Just 150 years ago, the information you got was like the fence that divided you and your neighbor, where you might be talking about like, oh, my cow had a calf. That's big news. That's the big news of the week, right? Like, oh, Jeff's cow had a calf. Well, all right. Wow, that gets around, you know.
Let me just write that down. I need to remember that.
Yeah, right. You put that on Twitter. Jeff's cow had a calf. And and that was the information we had. And then suddenly there were newspapers, and then we're more interconnected, and that's good, right? We're sharing information, and we made great innovations. We built rockets and airplanes and all kinds of things. But now there's so much that you don't even know what to believe and what not to believe, and now we're in the mess we're in because it got too noisy. But I do believe there is something to be regained when we talk person to person and share these stories the way they were always shared, right? Around a campfire or like, on some dark, stormy night or whatever it takes to connect and realize, one day we might all be a ghost. And who do we intend to haunt and why?
Well, I'm
Or why
haunting
would
you
we
because
stick
of your old
around?
calf. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
my poor calf. I know. What music, what instrument did you play?
I have a synthesizer, and
Nice.
when I was in school, I used to play clarinet. But now I'm really a singer. If I want to say anything, I
Fair.
sing songs. I've done it for a living for many years. But
So, Coit, you may not know this about me. In the whole of the paranormal world, I am the single best didgeridoo player you will ever meet when it comes to paranormal players. There's probably better didgeridoo players than me, but not in the paranormal. That's what I'm saying.
well, that is something to keep in there and really
Yeah.
enjoy for my life. I think.
In fact, if you wanted to name any song by any artist ever, I can play it on the didgeridoo.
That good, huh?
Do you want me to prove it?
Yeah. If you've got
Okay,
it
go
handy,
ahead.
get onto it.
Yeah.
I only know one other didgeridoo player in the world, and he's dead now.
But so it's me. Okay, name your tune.
Yeah, now you're the original. Nice.
Go ahead. Name a song.
All right, let's do Britney Spears.
Sure.
I don't know why. That the first one she did when she was in the pigtails. I can't even remember the song title.
Was that Oh Baby Baby? That
Yeah,
one?
that's the one. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, ready?
Go on then. Nothing's coming through.
Brilliant, right?
No,
Nailed
I
it.
didn't. I didn't. I didn't hear a single sound.
Are you kidding?
No, I
Try
think
again.
there's the compressor probably. Go up a bit. Do it there. I think the compressor on the audio is kicking it out, so I can't hear any notes. But
I'm telling you, it was like if you closed your eyes, Brittany.
it was bang on.
Yeah, like I never miss. I never miss.
The
I
shame
did
of it
a,
is no one heard that, so they can't agree or disagree with you. But if
it's like the tree falling in the woods.
yeah, I was just about to say the same thing.
Good.
Quality. With Ghost Adventures, right? Were there any
Yeah.
investigations for that show that actually really blew you away?
Yeah, so early on, we did a place called Penhurst Asylum, which is right outside of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. And when I started first working on it, I said, okay, abandoned asylum, we've done tons of these. The stories are sadly very similar. And there certainly were some similarities. Massive complex, built in the early 1900s. I think 3,000 people could live there when it was at its peak. It was big old, it looks like a college campus, but all completely abandoned and run down. But then when I started working on it, I went, oh, this is not like all the other asylums we've done. It shut down in the early 1980s. So it made it into quite modern times. And it turns out there's a federal law now in the United States called the Penhurst Law about how you can and can't treat people with mental disabilities because of atrocities that took place there in the 1970s. 1970s, not 1870s, not like, I mean, arguably, if you were alive when that happened, in this country anyway, you are guilty by association, right? I mean, even if you lived on the other side of the country. So we started digging in on it, and there was a reporter named Bill Baldini from the local news affiliate who went into this place, and he saw people being kept in dog kennels, like caged up in dog kennels. I spoke to a nurse who said how when she first started, there were something like 100 patients chained to their beds, and her job with another nurse was just to change adult diapers and go all the way around. And by the time she was finished, it was time to start again.
Oh,
And she
Christ.
said some of those patients would rub their feces into their hair and on their skin because not because they were crazy or didn't know any better. It's because they knew they would get a bath and some physical contact that they wouldn't get any other way. Imagine that, right? Imagine you have to resort to that. So uh, once we started digging in, we said, "Oh my, this was such a perfect storm of awfulness." I got to speak to patients, former doctors, former nurses, and what happened was they got so overcrowded and so underfunded and so understaffed that keeping people in a dog kennel or chaining them to a bed was all they could do to keep it together. Nobody was evil per se, but what happened there was ultimately completely evil, right? If you treated animals the way these people were treated, we would hang you from a tree and not apologize, right? If you treated dogs this way, we would be like, hang them and leave them there for the next person to see. But these were human beings. Pennhurst used to tell people when you would drop off your loved one, don't call, don't write, don't visit. It'll mess up the routine. The routine is everything. Trust us. We're the professionals. And then it got so bad. I talked to one of the former patients who said, if you bit someone more than once, they surgically removed all your teeth. Like, just, and these are folks that can't take care of themselves, right? These are people that need to be in some sort of institution. And I spoke to a doctor, and what he said to me just chilled me. He said, when you start to think as another group of human beings as something less than yourself, there's no limit to how badly you can treat them. And I'm like, oh God, that sums it up, doesn't it? Not just Pennhurst, but like the world we're in now. Like, oh, you're a Democrat. Oh, you're a Republican. Oh, you're Labor Party. Oh, you're this, you're that, right? You're less than, you're evil, you're bad. And the atrocities that took place there, when we've started to film, I realized like this place is haunted because it should be haunted, because this story needs to be told. The reality is in the 1980s, the United States did this process called deinstitutionalization under President Reagan. Basically, I think he decided everybody was cured. They weren't. And then our homeless population swelled and our prison population swelled because there are people that need to be in an institution. They cannot take care of themselves. It's unfortunate, but it's a fact. Medicine helps some folks, sure. There was medications that could make so some people could be out there and have jobs and stuff, but there's plenty that it couldn't help. And Pennhurst, man, the first time I walked into that building, we went down into some tunnels. I was with Dave Schrader too. Dave Schrader and Zach and me, the three of us, were standing in this tunnel that connected two of the buildings. No cameras, nothing. We had just gotten there, and we heard this like giggle way in the distance, and then this rush of wind was like right by us. And we looked at each other, and I remember thinking like, this building wants to talk. It's got something to say, and our job is to tell its story. And if that ghost show made people uncomfortable, Americans specifically, I can't speak to other countries and how they treat their people with needs, but if it made people uncomfortable, good, because that's what a ghost and a haunting will do sometimes. If it makes you look in the mirror and be a little bit uncomfortable about what you see looking back at you, maybe there won't be another Pennhurst in the future. Maybe we'll do a little bit better and realize it actually does matter how you treat the least of your people, the people who have the most needs. And that was one where like it just felt like we were all in on that one. Like this has got to count, and some stories we work on that you feel it in your bones. You're like, this is important. Like people need to know about this. People, I know sometimes it feels like we're digging up the past, and we're living in a time where groups are literally trying to hide from history. Let's not talk about anything that makes us not look perfect. I'm like, we're all imperfect, and sometimes you got to bring that stuff up because it will haunt you. And that's what a ghost story can do sometimes.
No, I like
remind
that.
you.
If you ask most people, right, they're not going to, if you say, what is a ghost? The essence of this conversation and your thoughts are their reminders and learnings so that we can progress, yeah?
Yeah.
But most people won't say that. They'll say, what's a ghost? Oh, it's a dead person come back to piss around with you, mess around. But you've got to look at it the way that you've said, because that makes complete sense to me now.
Well, I mean, it's
well played.
Decades of thinking about it, I guess. But
yeah.
it's. I mean, I don't have the answers. I don't. But I do think that the questions are really important, and that we ask them, and we at least try to find the answers. Because at the very least, the worst that can happen is you learn a lot about yourself, and that's still a good thing.
Yeah. Well, any learning is a good thing, isn't it? I like that. I'm going to take, that's the one thing, massive thing I'm going to take away from this, because you've got me thinking on a different tangent, and I like that. So thank you for that. It's a gift.
Sure.
New England's legends. Now, did you start that just because it's your area and you're around more information?
Yeah, so that sure. I mean, I wrote a book early on called Weird Massachusetts, which is where I live, right? And it was part of the
Hmm.
Weird US series. It was super fun. My first book was called The World's Most Haunted Places, where I looked at all over the world for like profound haunts. And I realized back on Weird Massachusetts that I had fallen into the trap of thinking all the cool places are far, far away from me, which I think a lot of us think, right? And
Mm.
you're wrong. There's very cool places near you. You just don't bother to look because you assume it's so close, it'll always be there, whatever, right? But you live far, far away from most of the world, you know? We all do. So I started looking at my own backyard and I went, oh, you know what? Here, I don't need hotels. I don't need airplanes. Like I can just drive it. I can check these things out. And so from that, it started as a TV series on PBS first, a limited series. And then making a show is so expensive and takes so much time and money and permits and all this other stuff. I was like, wow, with a podcast, we could do theater of the mind. We could, we do reenactments sometimes. And if you're in television and you want to do a reenactment of a battle scene, you could literally spend $10 million on that reenactment. You could hire actors and tanks and airplanes and helicopters and drones and a million extras. You could spend, there's no amount of money, no limit to how much you could spend to redo that. In a podcast with audio, you can buy a 99-cent sound effect, right? That's like, and you can put the listener into that place with an audio reenactment. And so the podcast allowed us to like just collect a lot more stories. But then something really cool happened. We started to get an audience, and the stories became sort of crowdsourced. So I grew up where I grew up. I live in the town I live in, and I hear things because of what I do. But someone who grew up in a little town in Maine, I don't know your stories, right? You'd have to
Mm.
be local for that. And so people started writing to us saying, hey, have you heard about this? In my town, there's this story. And I started to fall in love with the more obscure ones, the ones that not everybody knows about, but are really highly relevant to like a small community. And so, what's great now is the audience has grown to the point where the job just gets easier because people write in and say, "Oh, there's this story or there's that legend," and then we go investigate.
Yeah, so it means you're not having to do research all the time. It's coming to you. I like that.
Well, I
Yeah,
still have to figure out, I still have to research it, but the leads are the that are so
yeah, that's what
tricky.
I
Like,
mean.
yeah, we all know that it's like in music, the hits. Well, let's hear some B-sides.
Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah,
deep cuts. That's the
yeah.
ones we want. That's quality. Um, I want to talk quickly about the bigger picture before we journey into your books, and then also I want to talk about adventuring because I like the Kilimanjaro side of things, and I definitely want to talk about that. I want to hit the bigger picture. How do ghosts and other paranormal subjects fit together, do you think?
The best I've come up with is time. Time could literally explain everything paranormal you've ever heard of, from Bigfoot to aliens to UFOs, monsters, cryptids, especially ghosts. Ghosts are the most obvious, right? So a ghost would make perfect sense somewhere on the timeline, but not right now, not here in general, right? You see
Hmm.
a ghost of a Civil War soldier that made perfect sense in 1860. It does not make sense in 2025. Um, Bigfoot might have made perfect sense maybe a few million years ago, right? Some of the other cryptids, the same. Aliens. One of the things that I always come back to about aliens and UFOs, what's so intriguing to me is like, picture your prototypical gray alien, the big bulbous head and the dark eyes and so on. Why does that look so very human? With two arms, two legs, fingers, toes, a head, eyes where our eyes are, even roundish eyes. We look the way we look because we evolved on this planet with this specific amount of gravity, with this distance from the sun, with this exposure to the radiation that we have. We look if the Earth was twice as big, we might be really low to the ground, right? If the Earth was smaller and less gravity, we might be even taller and skinnier. But we evolved the way we did because of all the conditions on this planet. To assume that sentient, intelligent life on other planets would look anything at all like us is silly. right? I mean, I think there's other life in the universe. It makes no sense to me that the whole thing exists just for us. Like, I don't, that doesn't seem logical. But who would have more vested interest in us than us, right? If you could travel across the galaxy to come to Earth, why would you do that? Like, what is there for you to gain by getting here? Other than, I admit it freely, I know for a absolute undisputed fact, we have the best pizza in the universe on our planet. It's just true. It's a fact. It can't be argued, right? We have the best. However, if you grew up on another planet, eating it could kill you, right? Whatever bacteria in there that we're totally used to could be lethal to someone who isn't. Shoot, I spent a couple of weeks in Africa. I couldn't drink the water because I would get sick. And that's the same planet, right?
I know, it's
That's
weird, isn't it?
That's the same planet. So imagine another planet. So what if aliens are us, 500,000 or 1,000,000 years in the future? What if that's what we will evolve into looking like? What if ghosts and Bigfoot and all that stuff, what if it is a multiverse? What if these soap bubbles just keep bumping into each other and we keep peering in on each other from different directions? I don't know.
So that's where you've landed. You think it's just a time thing and it's all like compressing down or overlapping to show.
It's the best I got.
It makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
if that was the answer, would you be happy with that as the answer?
Sure. Yeah. I think I believe, well, first of all, I think it's been proven to us that time space is a singular thing and it's malleable. It is not a constant. The speed of light isn't even constant, right? As light hits a black hole, it has to get bent around it, which means even that, it's mostly a constant, but not always a constant. So if we think of time space as like a fabric, then why can't it ripple? We've actually measured it. There was a few years back, there's a couple of systems here in the US where there's these L-shaped lasers that point at each other to measure the slightest ripple in time space. Two galaxies collided, billions of light years away. And it's kind of like if you were at a very still pond and I was at the far end of the pond and I took a big boulder and I threw it in. Right near me, there would be a massive wave and all over the place. By the time it got to you, it would just be this teeny tiny little ripple because you're on the other side of the pond. That's what they measured with this laser system. They were able to measure that time-space rippled because of this incredible event that took place so far away. If you were much closer to the big boulder I threw in the water, you would be in a tidal wave, right? Like tomorrow could become today, today could be tomorrow. Everything is swirling, right? After this massive event, and then as it ripples out, the people further away, just get a little bump. Like, what was that? So I accept it as a possibility.
So that could be it then. So you're saying all the things that are happening now, these phenomenons, could be a result of the ripple.
It could be,
and
right?
Allowing things to
it
bend
could be,
over. Yeah.
And then, but I also think there is a force faster than the speed of light, and that is human consciousness. Which,
yeah, and that's another realm completely, isn't it, to go into?
Well, fortunately, where I live, marijuana is legal, and it helps discuss these kinds of things. But yeah, like at that point, all bets are off. Right now, we're into. Now shoot, Elon Musk told us that we're all living in a simulation.
I know, that's a great one.
And that may be so, but I still got to go to work and pay my bills tomorrow. You're right? Like in the simulation, I still need to eat or my simulation ceases to function.
Yes. See, there's three thoughts here, isn't there? There's the one you said, I like that one, by the way. This is a 3D reality. Maybe time ripples, time and space all ripples because of X that happened over there. Then you've got the simulation theory, which I think is where I would put my money, if I'm being honest.
The simulation, all right.
Yeah, I think so, because I think it's coded into the universe as mathematical. I can't even think of the word. It's either it's something mathematical in the universe. They've worked it out, haven't they, from whatever. That it's like almost like a code written into the background of the universe.
Well, let me try to dispel the simulation argument, though.
Okay, go for it.
Or at least give you something to chew on. So I mentioned much earlier that I grew up in Sandy Hook, Connecticut, which you may recall is where the school shooting was that shocked the world. That was my elementary school. I went there in 5th grade. And it was devastating, awful. My parents had neighbors who lost children, absolutely a terrible thing. my parents lived in the same house that I grew up in when that happened, and I spent Christmas there, the whole thing. Very quickly after that happened, especially here in the US, all kinds of conspiracy theories started to be floated that it was a staged event to take away the guns from Americans, that these were paid actors, that this was all a hoax, the whole thing. And that was so deeply hurtful to me. I can't even imagine how like people who lost their children felt about that. But it was so deeply hurtful. But then I remember talking to a prince of a man named Brad Steiger, who wrote a lot of books way back when, and he wrote a book on conspiracies, and we talked about conspiracies. The universe, just since the Big Bang, right, has been going from an ordered state to a disordered state. So if you've ever taken like a wine glass and dropped it or thrown it on the floor and watched it shatter into a million pieces, we've all seen that happen, or a plate or whatever. You've never seen the wine glass reform and come back whole, because that's not what the universe does or what it's been designed to do since the first instant, right? The first instant was order to disorder. We have been exploding into a disordered state ever since the Big Bang, billions of years. That's the natural order of thing, is chaos, and it's frightening and it's scary. And so for you to make up a story that none of those kids died, they're all fine, it's just some higher power pulling the strings, Illuminati, president, whoever, to, have some outcome that they want, that lets you sleep at night, thinking that there's someone in charge of this chaos. Even if it's for evil purposes, there's someone in charge and it'll be okay. The reality is that's just the way things have gone since the beginning, right? And so to say that we're part of a simulation, to me, is maybe the next level of conspiracy theory. We're just part of a simulation. Don't worry about it. Someone's in charge. We need to think someone intelligent is in charge. Even if they're doing terrible things to us, someone must be pulling the strings. Maybe they're not. And I know that's way more frightening for some people to contend with. But, the world is scary. What can I say?
I'm with you, by the way. I believe that as well. But I look at the simulation theory as a true possibility, not on the basis of conspiracy or anything, but more to the point of, I'm adding up all the pieces and it just seems designed. And I'll take fate as an example. Most people, if they really look at their life, they seem to end up in the position where they need to be or should be. Obviously not people who die, because no one wants to be in that position, do they? But there seems to be some sort of plan to the universe. And I don't necessarily put it down to a god or whatever, but it just seems to be designed to me. That's what I'm currently leaning towards. But I can if that one, the one that you mentioned, is absolutely true, I'm bang on with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I look at it as like, it's like an Indiana Jones scene where like the walls are shooting darts at you, the big boulders coming rolling at you, but some of us can dodge it better than others. Some of us can tumble and twirl and keep going. That's our job, right? Miss the oncoming traffic. Don't hit anybody on their way to school. Take care of yourself. Don't hurt others, and somehow get through the maze and the gauntlet get to the other side.
Definitely is a weird gauntlet. And the third thing I was going to mention was the whole consciousness angle. And this is what I would link it to the Matrix, the simulation, if you will, is that from other people I've spoken to, it's like the consciousness has created the simulation for us to come in and play with. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, anything you've ever seen, touched, or experienced was dreamed first by someone, right?
Yes.
Right. The computers we're talking on right now, someone dreamed it. Someone said, could this thing interconnect people across vast oceans and things like that? And then it became real, which is kind of cool. So someone thought it, electrical impulses in their brain fired, and someone else started to tinker and say, I think I could build that. And then it came to be. Yeah, which is kind of amazing too, right?
Yeah.
You literally dreamed it into reality like a tulpa.
I know. I love thinking on these big terms because no one can prove or disprove, but I like playing out them.
Yeah. Right. But it allows us to ask the big questions, know, and people who work in rockets and things like that will tell you that Gene Roddenberry in Star Trek
Inspired.
the idea of matter and antimatter. Suddenly they're like, that's not impossible. I mean, we put Captain Kirk into real space. To me, that was such a moment for me. Like, I get it, rich people doing rich people stuff that you and I can never ever afford. Whatever,
I'm
I get
going
it.
next week. You ain't stopping me.
But think about it, like Captain Kirk went into space, dude.
I know,
Like,
that's almost closing the loop right there, isn't it?
I was like, for me, I'm like, when all those rich guys go up into space, I'm like, I get it. You have toys I will never be able to afford. But when Kirk went up, I'm like, that's me. He's my proxy. He's the closest I'm gonna get. Is that's it, I was awestruck with that one. I'm like, wow, we put Kirk in space. Amazing.
I agree with you, by the way. Big Star Trek fan, are you?
Yeah, sure, yeah, all that stuff. Love it. Yeah.
Me too. Bang on.
Yeah.
Right, let's talk a quick bit about your books. So obviously you've written many books. Can I ask what seems like a comedy question, but it's not meant that way, which is why?
Yeah, no, God, man, I'd fire my therapist if I could figure that out. But so to me, and this will bring it back to the paranormal. A writing a book is an exorcism. It is the best analogy I can come up with. So I think of ideas all the time. I tend to not write them down for the most part because they come and they go. If I think of an idea like, oh, that could be a really interesting project or book, and if I forget about it, probably wasn't that good. If it keeps gnawing at me,
Then it is,
and gnawing at me over weeks and months and even years sometimes, then suddenly I go, all right, I get it. I got to deal with this, or it's really going to start to haunt me. And if it goes beyond a haunting, I'm going to need an exorcism. And the book is the exorcism. It's a story that must get out. And by the way, like as a guy who works in TV and in audio podcasting and in books and in live performances, I've gotten adept over the years of learning what medium the story belongs to, right? There are stories that can be told in a 30-second video on, Instagram, right? And that's all it needs. It's just like, hey, this weird thing, funny, over. There's stories that need a whole documentary film, and there's stories that need a book and need all the space that a book allows and the time. And so for me, like a book is literally an exorcism. It's a story that I'm so compelled to tell that that I have to tell it. And there was a time early on where I did write a couple of books for money, but I don't do that anymore because the money sucks. And I'm only writing books now about something that I feel so passionate about. I know I will also present it in front of live audiences. And that's my new policy as of the last 4 or 5 years. And that's where I'm staying because these things are too damn hard,
Yeah, do things you love is ultimately, isn't it?
Yeah, because, and by the way, that's part of the entitlement of getting older, right? Is to like, I've learned stuff that I don't like doing and stuff that I do like doing. And the more parts of my life I can bring in that I do like, well, that's just a better life. You know what I mean? And, you kind of earn that along your career somewhere where you're just like, oh, these pieces I like, those pieces I don't, I'll focus this way.
And sod everyone else. Yeah, that's just the way
well,
it is.
leave it for someone else.
Exactly. It's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Which medium do you prefer? Is it TV, live appearances, or the books?
I got to say live appearances, but all that other stuff feeds the live appearances. And sometimes too, like in a good live appearance, like you're bearing your soul, right? You really got to be vulnerable and share and say, I don't know. And be like, if you came here for some expert divine answers, like, woof, you're going to want your money back, I can't give those to you. But each one allows you to branch out in different ways. Like a book is so thorough, and you stare at it, you write it in drafts, right? It's not the first draft, whatever comes out, like that's been through such a process. You write stuff and then you move it around and you say, well, is this the right pacing to tell it? Is this the right order to tell it? Did I give you enough detail? Did I give you too much? These are the things that can literally make you mad. Leonard Cohen, musician who I admired for a long, long time, Canadian, he passed away just a couple of years ago. But I remember him saying in an interview once, he said, a poem is never finished. It's just abandoned. And I was like, that is brilliant. You could say the same thing about a book. books are never done. At just some point, you throw your hands up and you go, I can't do anymore. I imagine, writing a song. It's the same thing.
It's exactly the same thing.
You're like, I can't. I've tried it every which way I can think of. Fly, little bird. Like, I hope you make it. This is all I can do. And there's something satisfying about that level of exhaustion.
Yeah, I'm going through it at the moment because I've an album I've written is in production at the moment, and I'm one of these people that wants to keep tweaking and tweaking and tweaking till I get perfection. And ultimately, you can never get to perfection. So you have to do what you said, which is make a cutoff, fly, little bird.
But it's still worth trying. Like,
Yeah.
yes, perfection can't be achieved, but you don't ever want to slack off and phone it in, right? Not with something that's your art and something that's your soul and everything else. And so when you care deeply about that, you will, but then one of the things I've sort of learned to do to help me accept that is to just be like, this is where I'm at in this place and time, and this is what I can do right now. And this is the message for this place and time right now, and this is it. And then make peace with that. Because yeah, I mean, shoot, there's books that I wrote 15 years ago. I'd love another crack at that. I mean, I won't because I did it, but I'm like, oh, if I wrote that today, it'd be so much better. But it's supposed to be that way. You're supposed to get better.
Yes, it is supposed to be that way, but it is sad because I look back on some of my early songs and early animations I've done, and I think, oh Christ, that's shite. And if I did it now, it'd be amazing. But that's learning, isn't it? That's life.
Yeah, no, and there's a couple of stories where I'm like, boy, I would like another crack at that. And maybe if enough time passes, who knows? Maybe I'll sit down and take another stab. But at the same time, I'm also I love to travel, and I'll go anywhere. Like whatever, you got a ticket? Let me see it. I'll go. But at the same time, and I've gotten to visit different countries and so on. In general, especially if I'm spending my own money, I would rather go someplace new than go back to someplace I've been for no reason other than I've seen it. And it was wonderful, and I loved it. What a great place. If you're paying me to go back, sure, absolutely. But at the same time, like, let's see what else is out there. And so I feel that way about the stories and stuff that I'm chasing too. I love them. At the time, they are a piece of my life. It's like a relationship, like just like your album, just like your songs. Like that is a relationship you're in, however brief. Could be weeks, could be days, could be months, could be years. But you're in that relationship, and then it served you for whatever reason it served you, and then off it goes, and then a new one starts. And I think there's sort of beauty in that. And I don't want to be trapped or tied down to just one thing. And so, pursue what inspires you and see where it takes you.
I'm on the same train as you. I look for the new. Always look for the new. It's just that I think that's the growth, isn't it, for yourself, because you're approaching new territory.
Yeah.
On the subject of books, you've written a book called The Call of Kilimanjaro.
That one sticks out, doesn't it?
Yeah, which is the story of one of your amazing adventures.
Yeah, it's my not paranormal book. It's the one. It's the outlier. So although if you read it, there's some deeply spiritual stuff in there. I've always been a hiker. I've loved hiking mountains, and I lost my brother-in-law, Chris, to cancer back in 2016. And he had been, it was a 2-year battle with cancer. It came out of nowhere. He was in his 40s and had some stomach problems and went to the doctor. And then suddenly the doctor said, hey, stop whatever you're doing and come down here. And he knows that's not good, right? Doctors don't do that. And the doctor said, you have stage 4 cancer. It's metastasized and spread. You have about 2 years to live. And all of us, my nephew was 3 at the time, his son. And we were all just like, what? 2 years? And the thing about 2 years is it's interesting because it's both a long time and not a long time. It exists in both spaces. So during that, Chris went into a depression, but he and I got very close because I remember him calling me one day saying, hey, you're into some weird stuff. And I said, yeah, that's fair. And he said, I'm going through something pretty weird. I said, yeah, you are, no question. And so we talked a lot. My sister was in denial. She didn't want to think about him dying, but we all knew it was coming. It's just, the chemo and radiation could just put it off a little longer. And so we talked about it. And near the end, he was in hospital because his organs were failing. He was yellow with jaundice, and he called me and he said, this was so weird. And Chris was almost an atheist, right? So, but he said, I was in my hospital bed and suddenly I was like 15 feet above my body looking down at it. And he said, doesn't even make sense. The ceiling wasn't that high. I was higher than the ceiling, but I had the perspective. And I said, what'd you do? And he said, well, I was afraid of heights and it was over. I was back in my body. And I went, oh, I said, I've heard about these kinds of experiences before and people that are in his, particular phase of
Sure.
life. And so I said, wow, interesting. And then he called me the next day, he said, it's happening again. And then it was happening like every day. He was having out of body experiences. And then the doctor told him, hey, there's nothing more we can do. It's time to go home to hospice care. And so that weekend, it was early December, and my family drove. I live in Massachusetts. They live in Connecticut. So we drove down there, and we knew what that visit was. It's the goodbye that everybody complains they don't get. And having had it both ways, I can't tell you which is worse or better. So Chris and I sat and talked for hours, and I said, "What about the out of body experiences?" He said, "They're happening all the time, and now I'm seeing things." I said, "What do you mean seeing things?" He said, "Well, the first thing he saw was his cat from childhood." And he said, "And I never liked that cat." And I said, "Oh, that's weird." And I said, "What else?" He said, "Well, I saw my grandma," and he was close with his grandma. I said, "What do you think this means, all these out of body experiences?" And he said, "The best I can think of is that there's something inside this broken machine that's getting ready to break out and stay out." And that's the gift he gave me. As I was like, what a way to look at it. He was experiencing the thing, just taking baby steps out of the sinking ship. And so he passed away, and it was like 6 months later, and I was doing a charity event for this, raising money for this haunted building, historic preservation. And a friend of mine from the Leukemia Lymphoma Society said, "Jeff, we got this fundraiser coming up." And I'd done stuff for them in the past. And I said, "Oh, Amy, I'm really busy, but I'll do it if I can." And she said, "We're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro to help raise money to fight cancer." And I was just, it was like the record scratch, and everybody stopped. And I looked at her, I'm like, Kilimanjaro, that's the tallest mountain in Africa. It's one of the
That's right.
seven summits. It's the highest peak you can climb without, it's not a technical climb, it's a hike, right? You're not hanging from ropes and stuff. And it's been on my bucket list for years. And I went, Kilimanjaro. I'm like, when? She's like, March 2017. I said, oh, that's a good time of year for me. It's not the fall when I'm always gone. I was like, and raise money for cancer. Chris had just died. I don't know how many times like the universe holds something out on a golden platter for you, but in my experience, it's not often. And I was just like, yeah, I'm doing this. And so I was put together with a team of 5 other people from New England. Not all of us were strangers to each other, all of us climbing for the same cause. We started raising money, we started training, and I got to go do this incredibly life-changing experience. It would take 6 days to get to the top, 2 days to get back down. 19,341 feet is the peak. You can go ahead and convert to meters, but we it, it was incredible to me once you get on that mountain how we're spending nights in a tent. I'm not a camper. I'll go sweat all day long. But I want to shower in a cozy bed at the end of the day, right? And I'm on the ground, and as you get higher and higher, and the air gets thinner and thinner, and it's so difficult to breathe and keep moving and keep walking. And um, you know, at some point, it was the night we went for the summit. We started at 15,000 feet, and we start at midnight because it's going to take about 8 hours to get from 15,000 feet, 3 miles, just 3 miles to the summit is about an 8 hour journey because you got to go that slow, right? I mean, that is a really slow pace. And it's so difficult to breathe. I mean, you're almost out of your body. And at one point, I remember there's always chatter in my head. I don't know about you. They're always going,
Always.
all these
Yeah, yeah.
thoughts. It was about 3 in the morning, and I was as dark and cold as I've ever been in my life. I was, it's an Arctic tundra up there. There's glaciers, and the voices stopped, and I went, "Oh, this is either really good or really bad." And I looked behind me, and way out on the horizon, there was just this tiny little purple thing of light, and I went, "Oh my God, that's the sun, right?" And I'm like, if I can just go a little longer. And we got to the rim of the volcano at about 6:30 in the morning, And that's, over 18,000 feet high. And I turned around and we are high. The clouds are way below us, right? This floor of clouds is thousands of feet below us. And the sun had just broken through and it was just this golden light everywhere. And there's a word in Swahili for the top of the mountain. It's like where God dwells, and only those that God deems worthy is allowed up there. And in that moment, it was the most profound spiritual experience of my life. I saw this sunrise. I felt Chris right next to me, my brother-in-law, and I felt judged and I felt worthy. And in that moment, I was just like beaming. I went, I'm making it to the top. It's done, right? It was another like 3/4 of a mile to go, another, 800 feet or something. But I'm like, it's already made. I've made it. I will make it. There's no question. And all that was left after that was sort of like to finish it. And I came back changed. You know what I mean? Like that, not only physically grueling, but emotionally grueling. And to be unplugged, no internet, no phone for a week, right? Just you and the mountain. Your only job is to sleep, to eat, to keep moving. Life got so simple and really not far from where the first humans wandered out of Africa. You know what I mean? Like just absolutely one of the most profound experiences of my life. And that, yeah, that's something I'll never forget too. So
I imagine it is. I mean, nature is a powerful beast in a good way. I mean, I know years ago I went through an anxiety period, right? The best thing for me, and it got me out of it, was getting out into nature. It is so healing.
Yeah.
And I know you've experienced that in that moment, obviously.
Yeah. It's big. It's important.
It is very big, very important. Well played. I love to hear stories of things like that because I'm a hiker myself. I've done some mountains. I've never done Kilimanjaro. The biggest one I did was Ben Nevis. I know they're not easy to do, and I've not been on that one where you can't breathe. So
yeah. No, it's but they're all a challenge. But there's so many, the expression, right? Like you don't climb a mountain so the world sees you, right? You climb a mountain so you can see the world.
The world,
you know. And people have asked, like, how do you write a book? Well, it's the same way you climb a mountain, right? Just one freaking step. That's it. You don't think no one can climb a mountain. It's too high. But you can take a step, and you can take another step, and eventually those add up. And then you find yourself with nowhere left to go but the top.
I love that. So true and so apt. It seems a shame in a way that we're going to now go from that profound experience to something so trivial as we enter the Koit zone. Koit zone!
All right.
Now in the Koit zone, I'm going to ask you very, very basic questions, so answer best you can. So I'll be as quick as I can because I know we haven't got much time left. So first thing, toast. How are you having it done?
Both sides, not English. Come on, catch up.
Yeah, what's the level of your burning on your toast?
Oh, it should be golden brown, not burnt.
Nice. What item have you lost that still bugs you to this day?
My virginity.
Love that one. Is there a candy or chocolate that calls to you to eat it?
Yes, Cadbury's, especially the British ones. Dear Lord. I don't know why they're so much better than here.
So true. Never match Hershey's with Cadbury's because
no. I don't eat Hershey's here. That's so. And by the way, I have such a sweet tooth, and the only way I can control it is with chocolate, because really rich chocolate, I can have like one little piece and that'll be enough. If you have like a platter of biscuits, cookies, or whatever, I'll eat them all, and it won't be enough. But rich chocolate, I can do like one small dose and okay, calm down.
When you say rich chocolate, you mean like dark chocolate, yeah?
I like dark, but milk chocolate's okay too. But it can't have too much stuff in it, because if it's got too much stuff in it, it's too good, and I'll compulsively eat it. It has to be simple.
Simple, I like that.
Yeah.
I'm also a Cadbury's fan, by the way. Animals, I reckon, lead secret lives. If that's true, which one out there is watching you?
I have a cockatiel who literally is watching me quite often during the day, and he talks a little bit, so I have to watch what I do.
Yeah. Murderer!
Yeah.
That's what they... I saw you! Yeah.
Murderer if we're lucky.
Yeah. What is your best film experience at a cinema?
Star Wars, first one. The original, the OG. I was 3 years old.
Wow.
That's the first movie I saw in a theater.
I think mine must have been Flash Gordon, because I was born in 75, so I wouldn't have been... God, only 2 at 77, so... Yeah, I wouldn't have seen that one, but fair play. Love it. What music are you into?
Oh gosh. Well, didgeridoo, obviously.
Naturally.
Right, as one is. There's not too much I don't listen to. I like yeah, classic rock's probably like my go-to, but I like some rap music. I like some old school country. I like some electronic stuff. My daughter, who's 17, sends me songs to listen to, which is cool. Uh, World music is great. I love Irish music, especially around St. Patrick's Day. You know, any excuse to have a beer, lift a pint,
So, eclectic taste, then, essentially.
for sure.
Are you good at DIY?
Yeah, yeah, I am actually. I can swap out a toilet for you, put in flooring. Yeah, for sure.
Well, weirdly enough, I have a a toilet that needs replacing. So, if you're ever in England,
You know what? I do get to England pretty regularly. Toilet technology has not changed in 100 years. You can figure it out. I promise. It's just
I know,
gravity.
but it's the cistern's built behind a wall, so I have to demolish stuff to get it out, and so
That's tougher for sure. Yeah.
very much so. Do you collect anything?
Just stories. I don't like to be cluttered with stuff.
No, well, fair play. A nice simple life. And the final question in the Koit zone: a duck approaches you one day and offers you a magical choice. He says that he will grant world peace in exchange for a body part of yours. What part are you cutting off if you're doing
Oh
it?
God. The little toe. You can have it. I'm hardly using it.
On your left or right foot?
You know what? I'm keeping the toe. No world peace.
I was going to say, otherwise I was going to start writing the contract and then
Yeah.
we know where that
Nah,
leads.
the little toe. Little toe on the left side. I'm barely using it anyway. You can have it.
Lovely. Perfect. Thank you for that. Right, which leaves us two final questions, and then we'll close out. So the first is, what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
I do play guitar for fun. So yeah, little bit of music. And I still like to hike once in a while and run.
Awesome. Awesome. Do you play electric or acoustic?
I have an acoustic that can also go electric.
All right.
And I have a 12 string and I've got a banjolin and I've got a classical and as guitar players they tend to collect.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
But I do have one electric. It's a knockoff Strat, but but I like the acoustic. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. Which leaves us with the last question, which is, what are you currently working on, if anything?
I'm working on Ghost Adventures is still filming, so I just turned in an episode a few days ago. I'm still doing my weekly New England Legends podcast. I've got a new book coming out this September called Wicked Strange New England, which is all kinds of weird stories from the region with photography of my friend Frank Grace, who's a great photographer. And a whole new project I'm not quite ready to announce, but February. It's kind of cool. I feel like my career is sort of coming full circle with this one, but all weird and paranormal stuff for sure.
Excellent stuff. Everyone listening and watching this, check out the links in the description to Jeff's sites. Go and check out his books. Amazing stories, Jeff. Thank you ever so much for your time today. So everyone listening and watching, go and check those sites and books out for more of the same. Jeff, thank you ever so much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Thanks, Koit.
Goodbye. Bye, everyone. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.